All right, so now we are ready to start with our second little introductory R lecture, and we're going to talk a little bit about just some of the basics of R. We introduced R and RStudio. We just want to kind of talk about typical workflow, basic syntax, also working in RStudio, and then exporting your results when you're done. And then I'm going to finish up by looking directly at the software and giving you some examples. Typically, what you're going to do when you're working with R, you're going to have your data in a spreadsheet. You're probably going to record your data in Excel or Google Sheets or something. But you want to save that spreadsheet into the CSV, or comma saved value format. And if you're not familiar with that, it's just a very simple text file. It doesn't have a lot of formatting and all kinds of other things that you might have like in an Excel file. It's a very simple format, and it's foolproof. And so it has just the data, and the data are separated by commas, so comma separated values. Once you have that CSV file, you're going to import it into R, and it's going to load it into R's memory, and then R can work with it. And so then you're going to write a script to manipulate the data, or summarize the data, or analyze the data, or plot the data. So you're going to start by importing the data, then you're going to work with it in R, and then you're going to export the results. You know, maybe you're going to make a figure, or maybe you're going to have some statistical results or a summary table. And so you're going to export those, and then you're going to put that into a PowerPoint or to a Word document for a report or something like that. That's a very typical workflow. Okay, so R is a programming language. And so one of the things you got to learn when you're programming is that they're very specific and they're very picky, and R is no different. It's very precise, and so if it's making an error, a lot of times you made the error. You know, you have to be very, you know, R can't interpret your thoughts, okay? Classic saying in computer programming, garbage in, garbage out. And so if your coding is bad, or if you make a mistake, then the program is going to make a mistake. So you have to get used to that. The details matter. And so one of the frustrations you might have when you first start working with R is that, you know, you're getting errors and you're like, I don't understand why I'm getting these errors. Well, it's usually some very small detail, and R's error messages are not always great at letting you know where you made an error. You have to get used to it. That's just one of those things you have to get comfortable with. Okay, well, let's look at some of those details that matter. First off, capitalization matters. And so, you know, a capital A and a lowercase a are not the same thing in R. And so a lot of times you'll type some code and you'll get an error and you're like, well, I typed it perfectly, but you messed up. You didn't put a capital where it needed one, or something like that. And so that's a little detail, and it's frustrating when you first start out, but capitalization matters. Don't put spaces in names. So if you're naming a data frame or naming a vector or something, you can't have a space in there. You can have an underscore to represent a space, but no spaces. Also, don't start a name with a number. And so you can mix letters and numbers. So you can have data 1, data 2, data 2 fish, whatever, but you can't start it with a number. RStudio is pretty good at helping you catch syntax errors, and so if you miss a comma, miss a parentheses, you'll get an error, and you can RStudio will help you there. Basically, the program will run from top to bottom in that order. And so if you're, you know, manipulating data, and then you're going to analyze the manipulated data and then summarize that, you have to have them in order from top to bottom in your script. The hashtag is used to make comments, and you should get in the habit of making a ton of comments. And this, again, this is a programming thing. You write this code, you come back to it in 6 months, you might not remember, what was I doing, what was I thinking, why did I do it this way? Just use that hashtag, and everything on the line after the hashtag will not be run. It'll just be a comment. And so I tend to leave tons of comments in my code. A weird thing that people, you know, until you realize it, there's two ways to do an equal sign. And I think this is left over from earlier programming languages. R snobs will always use the less than plus the minus sign to mean equals. And I think there's maybe there's probably a reason, a theoretical reason why to do equals this way. It doesn't matter. It does not matter. They are perfectly equivalent. The equal sign and the less than plus the minus sign. So if you ever see that less than and minus sign, you're like, what the heck is this? It's equals. Okay, again, you're going to be doing most of your work in RStudio, and the basic idea is you're going to write this code in RStudio, then to run it, you're going to hold down Control and hit Enter. And so you can go line by line, and that way you can, run that line. Does that work? Yep. Run this line. That work? Yep. And so that way you can kind of go step by step and watch the progress. But if you've got a program that you've written and works, you can just select the whole thing, hit Control Enter, and the whole thing will run. And that's where you can really speed up your work. Once you've got a program written that works, you can just, you can have that program automatically load in the data, automatically activate the packages, run all the analysis, export the data how you want it, and you don't have to touch a thing. So that's pretty sweet. When you do something in RStudio, it is just talking to R, and the command that it sends to R will show up down in that lower left at the R console. And so you can do something in RStudio, see what that command is, then just copy that and paste it into your program. Then the next time, instead of having to go point and click, you can just run that line. And that's a great way to sort of build your code. You can have lots of things open at once, all on different tabs. So you can have several different programs or several different data files. They're all on different tabs, and so you can kind of jump between those, or you can copy from one script to another script, things like that. One neat thing that a student showed me is that you can mark spots in your script. And so if you have like 4 hashtags and then a label and then 4 more hashtags, this will actually create like a table of contents, or a chapter mark or something. And so when you start to make these really, really big, long pieces of code, this is really nice because RStudio's got a little spot that'll allow you to jump anywhere you've labeled something like this. And I'll show you an example of that here in a second. As we said with the workflow, the last thing is usually to export what you've been working on. As I mentioned with that workflow, once you've imported your data, done your work on it, then usually you need to export the results somehow. And there are several ways you can do that. So you need to be able to export things. Sometimes for simple things, they're output to the R console down there in the lower left of RStudio. And so you can just copy and paste, or you can screenshot it if you got just a very simple results. Your graphs, or if you're making maps, all those show up in the Plots tab in the lower right. And so again, you can copy and paste. It's actually better, it's got an export button. And I'll show you this here in a second, but you could export it and then copy that to the clipboard and then paste it. And a big advantage of this is it maintains a consistent size for all your graphics. And so everything is the same size, so they all look really good when you put them in your report. Sometimes you can export your results to a CSV. So maybe you're taking 2 big data sets and combining them somehow, or you're summarizing them, and what you need is a spreadsheet. And so then you can just export those data straight to a CSV, and then you can open that in Excel or do whatever you want with it. So that's some very common ways that you can export your data, and I'll show you examples of all those here in a second. Okay, so I want to show you just a few brief things here in RStudio and R, just to give you an introduction. And so, of course, this is RStudio that you're looking at. And over here in the upper left, this is where we write our script or our program. And so our first thing in our script is, you can see, we're going to load in packages. And so the first thing that I want you to see is I used a hashtag here, and
made a comment, and then I have this command library ggplot2. And so I have this package called ggplot2 that I want to use. Now if I come over here to the Packages tab, here's all the packages that I have installed. And you can see that ggplot2 has been installed. So I already have it. I only have to do that once. But if I want to use it, I have to activate it. And so I could check the box over here, but it's much easier to just use this command. And so I'm going to run this command now. And the way you run commands in RStudio is hold down Control and hit Enter. And if you look down here in the R console, you see that it gives a little warning message that this is nothing to worry about. But now this package is in memory, and so now we can use it. So that's the first thing we're going to do. Okay, so now we need to enter some data, load in some data so we can work on it. And so we need to tell R where the data are being held. And so we're going to set the working directory. So if I come down here to this Files tab, and I can hit this little button that's kind of hard to see, and then I can use this window to browse and find the folder that contains your data file. And so for me, it is going to be in this folder. And so now if you look, now you can see here's the contents of that folder. Here's all the files that are in that folder, and here is the CSV file that contains my data. But I want to set this as the working directory. So everything gets saved to this file, and I can keep everything kind of in one folder. Everything gets saved to this folder, and I can keep everything in one folder. So I'm going to go up here to More, and then Set as Working Directory. And now if you look over here at the R console, you see that this command got sent to R. So this is one way to kind of learn your R coding. You can have RStudio do something, and then you can come down here and see what the command looked like, and you can kind of pick up some coding that way. Another thing you can do is, now I can copy this. So I select, go Control-C to copy. Now I can come up here to my script, and I can go Control-V and paste that. So now, the next time I run this script, I don't have to go through all these steps over here on the File tab. All I have to do is run this line, and it will set the proper working directory. And so I like to put comments in, so I'm going to go hashtag set working directory. And now I've done a little work in this script. If you look here, the name of the script is in red and it's got a little asterisk. It's telling me it needs to be saved. So you can either hit this little save button, or you can hit Control-S or whatever, but save off it, save your work off it. Okay, now we set the working directory. Now let's import some data. So I'm going to come over here to the import data set. And then I'm going to import from a text file. That CSV file is a simple text file. And it automatically jumps to my working directory. That's why we set it as the working directory. And so here is the file I want to import. So I'm going to open that. And I get this import data set box. And here is where I name my data frame. And so, again, a data frame is a lot like a spreadsheet. And so if I'm going to import this text file, if I'm going to import a spreadsheet, it's going to go into a data frame because they're kind of the same thing. But you got to give it a name. And so I'm going to name it fish.dat because it's some data on fish. Everything else looks good. If you look down here, this is what the data frame is going to look like, and it looks good. I've got length in the first column and weight in the second column. So I hit import. And when I do that, if you come up here to the Environment tab, you see that now I have a data frame listed, and it's got 216 rows and 2 columns. And also it automatically shows me the data frame, and it all looks good, right? So I don't need this open, or I can leave it open, it doesn't matter. And then finally I can come down here to the R console, and here are the commands that got sent to R to open that data frame. So as before, I can select and Control C to copy, come up to my script, Control V to paste. And so now I've got the command to load in that file and save it in a data frame named fish.dat. So if I wanted to run this again later, I don't have to go over here. I don't have to use this button and go to all that trouble. I can just run that line and it will do all the work for me. And so again, let's hashtag import data into fish.dat, just so I can remember. And I'm going to come up here and I'm going to save my work. Now this is really kind of awkward and unwieldy, this long name. And if you look from here to here, that part of the name is all describing, you know, the working directory, right? That's the folder structure. And we've already told R what the working directory is. So I can select that whole thing and replace it with a period. And now R knows, hey, look in the working directory for a file with this name. And so that's another reason to set the working directory. It just makes the rest of your code a little cleaner. Okay. And so that's usually how we start. We have to load in some data. And we've shown how to make comments. We've shown how to make to get the commands to set the working directory and import the data, so you can run those a lot faster the next time you want to run them. We're going to save again because we changed our script. Now if you have big scripts and they get really long, it starts to become unwieldy to kind of find your way around. And so you can set some like bookmarks. And so in RStudio you can go 4 hashtags, and then you can give the bookmark a name. This is well, I don't want to type all that. I can just say bookmark 1, or here's where I plot, or site 2, or whatever you want to call it. And then you go 1, 2, 3, 4 more hashtags. And so if you look, once you do that, down here, it's really kind of small and hard to see, but you can see that that bookmark is now listed down here. And everywhere you've made one of these bookmarks, they'll be listed. If you click on this, you see I've got another bookmark, and so I can select it, and I jump to the top here, where I've set my first bookmark. And so, if I had a bunch of spaces, and I needed to jump around quickly, I could do that using these bookmarks. So I can just come down here, go to bookmark, and then I've jumped down to this bookmark. And I did that by using 4 hashtags, the name, and then 4 hashtags. And now, this bookmark is set near the next set of commands, which I've already written. So we've imported the data, we've got to do something with the data. Let's just plot it. And so with this command, I'm going to plot length against weight. And in later assignments, I'll explain all these different commands to you. But basically, you can see that I'm going to create a vector named LW. And I just named it that for length weight. You can name it whatever you want. And what am I going to store in LW? Well, I'm going to plot something. Well, what am I going to plot? I'm going to plot length on the x-axis and weight on the y-axis. But you got to tell R where to find those vectors, where to find those values. Well, they're stored in the data frame named fish.dat, which we just created. And then I told it we're going to plot it, but I haven't told it how we're going to plot it. So I got to add a plus sign here and a return. And then here's another function, geom_point. And so that tells R, oh, okay, plot it like a scatter plot, plot the points. And so I can go ahead and hit Control, Enter. And again, if you come down here to the console, you can see that that command got sent to R. But you also don't see a plot anywhere, right? Nothing happened. That's because I just stored the plot in this vector named LW. I haven't actually shown it. And so this command, plot LW, is telling R, okay, now show me the plot that is stored in LW. And so I'm going to hit Control, hold down Control, and hit Enter. And if you come over here, now you see the Plots tab became active. And here's a simple plot with length on the x-axis and weight on the y-axis. And so that's basically what you do in R, is you issue those commands and it does the work for you. And so last thing I want to show you is, maybe we'd like to take this graph and paste it somewhere. And the best way to do that is to come here to Export and then copy to clipboard. And so then you have this button down here called Copy Plot, or labeled Copy Plot. And now this graph is in the memory. And so now I can go to something like Word or PowerPoint. And I can go Control V and paste the image. And so that's just some R and RStudio basics. And what we're going to do is just practice with those a lot, and they'll become second nature. So have fun.